Chapter 1. The 7-Day Condition. The late afternoon sun, a pale winter gold, filtered through the towering windows of Blackwood Manor, stretching long, skeletal shadows across the polished marble floors. Despite its undeniable grandeur, the house was stiflingly cold, a reflection of the bitter dynamic between the two men within. Elias Thorne, 28, stood rigidly by the immense stone fireplace, his hands clenched into tight fists as he faced the man seated opposite him. His father, Silas Thorne. Silas, confined to an ornate, motorized wheelchair, wore his signature expression of icy disdain. Beside him stood Mr. Chadwick, the family attorney, who adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat, opening a heavy leather-bound folder. "Elias," Mr. Chadwick began, his tone professional and grave, "as per your father's recently revised will, there is a critical clause regarding the inheritance of the Thorne estate." Elias rolled his eyes, his immense frustration palpable. "Just get to the point, Chadwick," he snapped. The lawyer hesitated only slightly before continuing. "You must be married by your 29th birthday to secure the inheritance. Since your birthday is precisely 1 week from today, that gives you 7 days to fulfill the condition. Should you fail, the entirety of the estate will be liquidated and donated to charitable trusts." The room fell into a heavy, resonant silence, the weight of the ultimatum crushing the air. Elias stared at the lawyer, then at his father, his disbelief rapidly curdling into blistering rage. "This is insane!" Elias exploded, pacing back and forth across the marble expanse. "You can't dictate my life like this. Marriage isn't a race you can just rush into, especially not for some ridiculous clause." Silas's expression remained utterly impassive as he spoke, his voice sharp and metallic. "It's not just about the money, Elias. It is about proving that you are capable of assuming responsibility, that you can make a serious commitment to something greater than your own fleeting self-interest." Elias stopped pacing, his eyes blazing with old resentment. "Responsibility? This is about control. You've been trying to control me ever since the accident." Silas's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "And look how you've fared without it, wandering aimlessly, living off the Thorne name. Do you think that's what your mother would have wished for you?" At the mention of his late mother, Elias's jaw tightened, his anger threatening to boil over. "Don't you dare bring her into this," he growled through gritted teeth. Mr. Chadwick, sensing the imminent explosion, interjected. "Gentlemen, perhaps we could discuss this calmly." "No!" Elias cut him off, turning back to his father. "You've blamed me for everything that happened that night, haven't you?" Silas's eyes narrowed, a momentary flicker of ancient pain crossing his face before his cold composure returned. "This is not about the past, Elias. This is your final chance to prove you are not merely a spoiled boy who has never labored for anything in his life. Show me you are serious about the family legacy." Elias let out a bitter, cutting laugh, throwing his hands up in a gesture of surrender. "And if I don't jump through your ridiculous hoops, what then? You'd rather give everything to strangers than let me have it?" Silas leaned forward slightly, his voice low and razor-sharp. "If you cannot meet this simple condition, then yes, I will not leave the Thorne legacy in the hands of someone who refuses to grow up." Elias felt a heavy pressure on his chest, his father's words cutting deeper than he cared to admit. He turned away, staring out the window at the vast, sprawling estate, his home and, for years, his gilded cage. "I don't need your money," he said finally, his voice quieter, laced with desperate defiance. "I can walk away from all of this and be just fine." Silas chuckled, a cold, mirthless sound. "Then do it. Walk away. But we both know you won't, because deep down you care about this family and its legacy more than you're willing to admit." Elias offered no reply, his fists clenched tight at his sides. Mr. Chadwick looked between the two men, visibly uncomfortable. "Elias, you have 7 days. If you choose to proceed, I strongly recommend immediate action." With that, the lawyer closed his folder and excused himself, leaving father and son alone in the intensifying silence. Chapter 2. The Desperate Plan. Later that evening, Elias sat in his private study, a glass of expensive amber whiskey in his hand, recounting the day's events to his best friend Julian. The whole thing is a farce, Elias muttered, running a hand through his dark hair. How am I supposed to find someone to marry in 7 days? Julian, lounging on the couch with his usual easy smirk, shrugged. You have wealth, a certain rogue charm sort of, and access to practically anyone. It's not impossible. Elias shot him a cold look. I'm not buying a wife, Julian. This is not a business transaction. All right, fair enough, Julian conceded, holding up his hands. A mischievous glint appeared in his eyes. What about blind dates? Elias groaned. You can't be serious. Think about it, Julian said, leaning forward. We arrange a few meetings with women who might actually like you crazy, I know. You only need one yes. Worst case, you get great stories. Best case, you secure the estate and find someone who doesn't despise your guts. Elias swirled his drink, considering the ridiculous, desperate idea. It was entirely outside his comfort zone, but as the weight of Silas's ultimatum pressed down, he realized his options were vanishing. Fine, he said, the word wrenched from him. Set it up, but if this goes south, I'm blaming you. Julian grinned, raising his glass in a mock toast. Don't worry, buddy. By the end of this week, you'll be thanking me. Elias drained his whiskey, the tension in his chest easing infinitesimally. He had no idea what chaos he was inviting, but one thing was certain. The next 7 days were about to reshape his life. Chapter 3. The Unconventional Candidate. Julian, leveraging his contacts, enlisted a high-end matchmaking service, promising to filter for sincerity over simple greed. But the reality was messy. The first few dates were disastrous. One woman, a fashion influencer, spent the entire dinner taking selfies, more focused on her feed than the man across the table. Another, a socialite, spoke only in glittering detail about her designer wardrobe, occasionally pausing to ask precise questions about Elias's liquid assets. By the fourth failed date, Elias was ready to surrender. Every encounter was transactional, a painful mirror reflecting only his wealth, never the man. Okay, I'll admit, Julian confessed late one evening, surveying the remnants of takeout. Maybe this hasn't been as seamless as advertised. Understatement of the century, Elias glared. If I have to listen to one more person calculate my net worth during an appetizer, I'm out. Relax. Julian held up his hands. I have one final setup, and I promise you, she's not like the others. How do you know? Elias asked, skeptical. Because, Julian said, his tone unusually serious, she has no idea who you are. No background check, no fancy introduction. Just a normal, standard blind date. Consider it your absolute last shot. Elias sighed, hating how vulnerable this whole charade made him feel. All right, he said, defeated. One more. But after this, I'm done. Clara Vance adjusted the hem of her simple, deep emerald dress, glancing at her reflection in the full-length mirror. Her red-brown hair framed a face marked by a mix of curiosity and weary apprehension. This is ridiculous, she muttered, grabbing her sensible coat. Across the room, Lena, her vibrant roommate, spun around in her desk chair. No, this is an adventure. It's a blind date. Think of it as field research. You work with people all day. You're an expert. I'm a social worker, Lena, not a case study subject, Clara replied, rolling her eyes. And you are solely responsible for this awkwardness. Go have fun, Lena urged. Worst case, free coffee and a funny story. Elias sat at a secluded table in a quiet, unassuming cafe, nursing a black coffee. When the bell above the door chimed, he looked up, expecting the usual polished veneer. Instead, he saw Clara. She paused at the entrance, her eyes scanning the room, before settling on him. Her modest dress, practical shoes, and warm, unpretentious demeanor were a stark contrast to the women he'd endured. Clara approached the table, offering a polite, firm handshake. Nathaniel? Just Elias, he replied, standing. I'm Clara. They ordered drinks, the conversation beginning stiffly. Elias studied her, searching for the hidden motive. She wasn't fawning, nor was she trying too hard to impress. After a moment of silence, he leaned back, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Let me guess. You're here for the money, too. Clara raised an eyebrow, utterly unimpressed. Excuse me? If I wanted money, I'd be at a job interview, not a blind date. Elias blinked, genuinely caught off guard. His usual provocation had failed. Okay, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. I deserve that. I'm clearly not a professional dater. That much is obvious, Clara said, her lips curving into a small, teasing smile. Fair enough. So what's your story? Why did you agree to this? My roommate thought I spent too much time working and not enough time living. She shrugged. I'm a social worker. I connect families to resources, advocate for foster children, that sort of thing. Elias was impressed despite himself. That sounds utterly exhausting. It can be, Clara admitted, but it's worth it. What about you? I'm in business, he answered vaguely, used to guarding details. Clara's eyes narrowed slightly, catching his evasion, but she let it slide. As the conversation continued, Elias found himself unexpectedly lowering his guard. Clara asked thoughtful questions, listened intently, and even made him laugh with her dry wit. For her part, Clara was intrigued by the glimpses of vulnerability she saw beneath Elias's polished exterior. After nearly an hour, Clara glanced at her watch and stood, grabbing her coat. Leaving already? Elias asked, surprised by the pang of disappointment. Early morning, Clara said, her tone firm. She paused, looking him directly in the eye. You're not what I expected, but I'm not sure that's a good thing. Before Elias could respond, she was gone, the door chiming softly behind her. He sat there for a long moment, staring after her. For the first time in a decade, he felt something other than cynicism. He felt intrigued. Chapter 4. The Proposal of a Lifetime. The next day, Clara was at the bustling community center where she worked, sifting through a stack of underfunded grant applications. It was a relentless battle, but one she fought with fierce dedication. The front door jingled, and she looked up to freeze. Elias Thorne stood there, looking distinctly out of place in his tailored coat and gleaming shoes. Elias, she said, astonished. What are you doing here? He walked toward her with determined steps. I need to talk to you. Clara folded her arms, raising an eyebrow. About what? Another dating etiquette lesson? Elias winced but pressed on. I know this sounds completely absurd, but please, hear me out. She leaned against the counter. I'm listening. Elias took a deep breath, clearly uncomfortable. I need your help. My father's lawyer dropped this ridiculous condition on me. I have to be married within a week to secure my inheritance. Here, Clara's expression turned skeptical. And this involves me? How? I want you to marry me, he stated plainly. Silence descended. Clara blinked, then let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. I'm sorry, what? It's not what you think, Elias rushed to explain. It would only be for a year. No strings attached. I will pay off your student loans and donate a significant, life-changing amount to your community center. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement. Clara stared at him, incredulous. You think you can just buy people's lives because you're a millionaire? No. Think. You. It's not just about the money, Elias insisted, his voice quieter now. I need someone I can trust. Someone real. And for some reason, I think that's you. Clara opened her mouth, but no words came out. She wasn't sure what stunned her more, his sheer audacity or the genuine vulnerability shimmering in his eyes. You're serious, she finally said. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, he replied. Look, it's unconventional, but it's a win-win. You get the funding you need to change lives here, and I get to keep my family legacy. Clara shook her head, stepping away. This isn't a business deal, Elias. Marriage it's sacred. You can't just throw money at it. I know it's not ideal, Elias said, frustration creeping into his voice, but I'm out of options, and I think we could make this work, for both of us. That evening, Clara recounted the bizarre encounter to Lena. He offered to pay off my loans and fully fund the center, Clara said, still shaking her head. All I have to do is marry him for a year. Lena leaned forward, her eyes wide. And you said no? Of course I did. It's insane. Marriage isn't supposed to be some transactional agreement. Lena tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. I understand, but think about what you could do with that money. The center could finally expand. You could help so many more people. Clara frowned, deeply conflicted. But at what cost? Selling my integrity? It's not like he's asking you to actually fall in love with him, Lena pointed out. It's just a year. And from what you've said, he's not an awful guy, a little arrogant, maybe, but not a monster. Clara sighed, resting her head in her hands. The offer was agonizingly tempting. Her financial struggles were a constant burden, and the thought of securing real, lasting change in her community was impossible to ignore. I don't know, she whispered. It just feels so wrong. The next day, standing amidst the chaos of the center, staring at the growing pile of unpaid utility bills, Clara made her decision. That evening, Clara met Elias at a small, quiet bistro. He looked surprised to see her, quickly masking it with his usual calm demeanor. Change your mind? He asked. I have conditions, Clara said, cutting straight to the point. Elias leaned back, intrigued. I'm listening. 1. No physical intimacy, Clara stated firmly. 2. Complete honesty about our agreement to the relevant parties. And 3. This ends after exactly 1 year. No extensions, no complications. Elias nodded, a flicker of disappointment hidden behind his acceptance. Agreed. He pulled out his phone. I'll have my lawyer draft the binding contract tonight. Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. I still think this is crazy, she admitted. Elias smiled faintly. Probably, but sometimes crazy works. The next day, they signed the agreement in the presence of lawyers. As Clara walked out of the office, the immense weight of her decision settled over her. It's just a deal, she told herself. Nothing more. But deep down, she knew her life, and perhaps Elias's, was about to change in ways neither could predict. Chapter 5. The Walls Crumble. The days following their contract marriage were a strained whirlwind. Clara moved into Elias's sprawling penthouse, and while the space was immaculate, their arrangement was profoundly messy. For the first few weeks, their conversations were strictly transactional, revolving around schedules, public appearances, and the cold mechanics of their agreement. They existed in parallel, separated by an invisible pane of glass. One evening, Clara found Elias in his study, staring at a framed photograph of his father. She hesitated at the doorway before stepping in. Are you all right? She asked gently. Elias glanced at her, his expression conflicted. I was just thinking, my dad wasn't always this way. Before the accident 10 years ago, he was different. Clara sat down across from him, her gaze steady. Have you ever told him that? Elias frowned. What's the point? He doesn't listen. Maybe he would, Clara suggested. Or maybe it's just something you need to say for yourself. Her words lingered in Elias's mind. The next day he visited Silas. Their conversation was tense, but for the first time in years, revealing. Elias began to see his father not merely as a critical voice, but as a man shattered and reshaped by his own grief and pain. Meanwhile, Clara poured herself into her work, seamlessly balancing her responsibilities at the center with her new public role as Elias's wife. Though she kept her life fiercely private, her passion for helping others gradually drew Elias's attention. One night, he accompanied her to a small fundraiser for the community center. Clara stood at the makeshift podium, addressing a crowd of modest local donors with a mix of poise and fervor. These children need more than just a roof over their heads, she said, her voice steady and clear. They need hope, opportunity, and people who truly believe in their worth. Together, we can give them a future worth fighting for. As the small crowd erupted in heartfelt applause, Elias felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest. He had always seen Clara as pragmatic and independent, but now he recognized the depth of her empathy and how much he admired her for it. Later, as they mingled, Clara stumbled, accidentally spilling a glass of water onto Elias's expensive jacket. Oh no, she exclaimed, grabbing a napkin. I am so sorry, Elias. He laughed, a genuine, surprising sound. It's fine. I've survived worse. Their eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, the noise of the room faded away. Clara felt her cheeks flush, and Elias's expression softened into something tender. You're amazing, you know that, he said quietly. Clara opened her mouth to reply, but they were interrupted by a well-wisher. Still, the moment lingered, sharp and unmistakable in both their minds. Chapter 6. A New Deal for Forever. As their connection deepened, Silas grew suspicious. He hired a private investigator who swiftly uncovered the truth about their contract. One evening, Elias returned from a meeting with his father, his face pale and his jaw tight. Clara looked up from her reading, concern etched on her face. "What happened?" she asked. "He knows," Elias said bluntly. Clara's heart sank. "How?" "Private investigator," Elias replied, running a hand through his hair. "He thinks I manipulated you into this. He doesn't believe us." "What did you tell him?" Clara asked, her emotions swirling. Elias turned to her, his eyes earnest. "I told him the truth, that I care about you, that this might have started as a deal, but it hasn't been just that for a long time." Elias, before she could say more, Elias crossed the room and took her hands in his. "I know this wasn't what either of us expected," he said softly, looking directly into her eyes. "But I'm not pretending anymore. I, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." Clara felt tears welling up. His vulnerability was almost painful to witness. Before she could form a reply, Elias's phone buzzed. It was Silas. "You better prove it," Silas's voice came through, gruff and skeptical. "Because if she's the one, you can't afford to mess this up." Elias ended the call, his resolve hardening. "He doesn't believe in us, but I don't care. I just need to know one thing." "Do you?" Clara hesitated, her heart pounding, leaving Elias with the unsettling realization that for the first time in his life, he was utterly vulnerable. Clara paced the length of the living room, arms crossed. Elias stood by the window, his face a mixture of guilt and frustration. "So let me get this straight," Clara said, her voice sharp but controlled. "Your father hired someone to dig into our contract, and instead of telling me, you let me find out from a phone call?" Elias turned to face her. "I didn't want to drag you into the drama. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "From what? The truth? Or from the fact that this entire foundation was built on a lie?" Elias's shoulders slumped. "I was a fool," he admitted, his voice quiet but firm. "I treated our marriage like a business deal because I was terrified. Terrified of failure, terrified of my father, and terrified of you." "Me?" Clara asked, incredulous. "Yes, you," Elias said, his voice raw. "You are everything I'm not. Selfless, principled, real. I didn't know how to handle that, so I hid behind the terms of the deal. But I'm not hiding anymore." Clara stood silent, absorbing his confession, the truth of which she had suspected all along. The next morning, Elias sat in his father's study. "Well?" Silas asked, his piercing gaze fixed on his son. "I love her," Elias said simply, straightening his shoulders. "And I don't care what the will says. I'm not letting her go." Silas was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a single folder, sliding it across the desk. "What's this?" Elias asked, frowning. "Read it," Silas commanded. Elias opened the folder and scanned the document. His eyes widened as he reached the bottom. "The inheritance was never at risk." Silas nodded, a faint, almost tender expression softening his face. "It was a test, Elias. Not about money or marriage, but about you. I needed to know if you could finally grow up, take responsibility, and care about someone other than yourself." Elias clenched his fists, torn between outrage and overwhelming relief. "So you manipulated me? Us?" Silas's gaze didn't waver. "And it worked, didn't it? You proved me wrong. Now go prove yourself to her." That evening, Clara arrived at the community center to find it utterly transformed. String lights were draped across the ceiling, tables were adorned with simple flowers, and the children and staff greeted her with wide, knowing smiles. "What is going on?" Clara asked, confused. "Come and see," Lena said, appearing at her side and guiding her toward the main hall. There, standing under a canopy of warm, glowing lights, was Elias. He looked nervous but utterly determined, holding a small velvet box. As she approached, Elias began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Our first deal was a mistake. I treated you like a solution to my problem, and I was wrong. You are not a deal, Clara. You are my heart, my future, my everything." Clara felt tears welling up, but she remained silent, letting him speak. "I don't deserve you," Elias said, dropping to one knee. But I'm asking anyway. Let's make a new deal. A deal for forever. He opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring. Will you marry me for real this time? Clara stared at him, her heart pounding with a wild, joyful rhythm. She took a deep, steadying breath, and her lips trembled into a radiant smile. You don't have to buy me, Elias, she said, her voice filled with love. You already have me. The room erupted in cheers as she reached down to pull him to his feet, their embrace warm and full of boundless promise. Months later, the community center was packed for their wedding. Friends, family, and the people Clara had worked so hard to help filled the room, their collective joy palpable. Silas, seated at the head table, raised his glass during the toast. To my son Elias and my new daughter Clara, he began, his voice uncharacteristically warm. Elias, you've shown me that you're not just capable, you're extraordinary. And Clara, thank you for teaching us all what it means to love selflessly. As glasses clinked and laughter filled the room, Elias and Clara shared a quiet moment on the dance floor. Do you think your dad finally approves? Clara teased. Elias smiled, spinning her gently. Who cares? All that matters is us. And as they danced under the glow of the light, surrounded by the love and community they had created together, they knew they had found something infinitely greater than any inheritance. Each other.